Welcome to Soul Elevation, where you can guide your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I'm so excited about this conversation with Eesha Patel. Many of you know that I'm fascinated by the ET phenomenon and love connecting with those who are in contact with life beyond Earth, as Eesha certainly is. I was so interested to hear her talk about her ET experiences. And we get a little bit into mine in terms of Ashtar because Eesha is in contact with Ashtar. And I had an experience a few years ago. So I was excited to talk to her about that and get her take on it. She has such specific and detailed insights about the beings that she's connected with. And what's so exciting with Eesha is that she helps other people to make those types of connections for themselves. So you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Eesha Patel specializes in the field of galactic consciousness. She's here to facilitate the connection between humans and our galactic family. She's currently doing her PhD in UFO and UAP studies, focusing on intergalactic communications and diplomacy. She's a galactic ambassador and liaises with over 20 different galactic races, humanoid and non-humanoid, and facilitates these connections for visionary leaders and pioneers of the new Earth. Eesha's vision is a peaceful, open contact with our galactic family by 2027, and her mission is to lead this global awakening through her teaching, speaking, facilitation, and courses. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But do you have your ticket yet to the Sedona Ascension Retreat happening March 14th to 16th, 2025? I can't wait to hear the amazing presenters such as Bashar, Robert Edward Grant, Billy Carson, William Henry, and previous guests of the podcast like Adam Apollo, psychic lawyer Mark Anthony, Alan Steinfeld, Vivian Chavot, Amanda Romagna, and so many more amazing guests. I found last year's conference amazingly activating, and I feel so excited about this year's lineup. Go to SedonaAscensionRetreats.com and use code KaraGoodwin5 for 5% off your ticket. I hope to see you there. And now enjoy this episode. So welcome, Eesha. I am so excited to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. I'm keen. I always love these conversations and where we can take them.
Yes, and you're doing such amazing work out there. We were just talking about how you're doing a PhD, and that just started for you, and you're studying galactic topics with your PhD. I want to know, I want to start by talking just about your background and your journey and how you got to where you are now with your ET connections and being a galactic ambassador.
Yeah, for sure. Some of it really started quite early on in my years. Like, for example, when I was about 10, 11 years old, I started having some supernatural kind of experiences in the house and the perceiving of like a ghost or a woman that would stand at the edge of my bed, which kind of freaked me out when I was a kid. You know, it was a bit scary experience. But she was harmless. She just stood there and didn't really do much. But it was enough for me to have my light on, my night light on, even at 12 years old, you know. So so I remember having that experience and going, okay. So yeah, I had a few things like that. And then also in my teenage years, just having really strange experiences with energy, like touching lights and they just suddenly blow off but like more consistently than what you would expect, you know. Like, I mean, sure, once in a while a light bulb blows, you go replace it, it's no biggie, right? But when it happens 5 times in a week, you're like, what's going on here? So it was things like that, and then moving into like seeing 1111 everywhere and getting these signs that there's something. And you know, I remember being as young as maybe 14 or 16 years old and going on Google and what does 1111 mean? What is this all about? You know, so when you're doing it at that young of an age, I feel like there is something in the universe that was kind of guiding me into all of this. But then, you know, life happens and, you know, you go to school and I had friends and then I got a boyfriend and, you know, all those things happened. And so I did that whole side of life. And then, yeah, sort of in my early 20s was when things just started ramping up in terms of the experiences I was having, the energetic sensitivities I was experiencing. And around that time, I met someone. She was actually my dance teacher. And she said, "Look, I can teach you this meditation, and I think it'll be really helpful just to ground you in, and we can do these sessions together." And I said, "Yeah, okay, all right, So yeah, I invested in this mentor when I was quite young, in my early 20s, and she taught me how to activate my Merkaba light body. Now, of course, back then I was just following the mentor. I didn't know that it was going to be this incredible, amazing practice that was going to change my life. It was just like I just wanted to get away from the bad energies. I wanted to be able to sleep better at night. So I was also getting quite a lot of nightmares in my teenage years, like really quite horrific. Like now I know it was more like a psychic attack kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
But it was like, yeah, like demonic entities and just horrible, like, stuff you don't want to see. So when I explained all of this to her, she was like, "Look, this practice will help you. It'll help you protect your energy field. It'll help you, protect yourself from these ghosts and these, whatever else that you're experiencing." So I was like, "Yeah, sign me up, like anything to get rid of that." So I was pretty keen to do that. And so yeah, I worked with her for about a year. And she taught me how to do the practice. I had a few sessions at her house, and then I went and practiced a lot on my own as well. And so when I started practicing this on a regular basis, it was about probably 18 months down the track after I started working with her that I started to have this experience of just being really, really expansive. And there was this one very specific meditation that I still recall. I was sitting on the floor in my bedroom, and I just had this experience of being completely enveloped in the oneness. And it was like that my body, my energy field, it was like there was no separation between myself and the rest of the world around me. And when I felt that unified field and was in it, immersed in it, I had this voice that came through and said, "You're in the 13th dimension." And I don't know who that voice was. I didn't know, anything. I now look back on it and I go, that was probably just my higher self, talking to me. But it was the experience of that got me down into this rabbit hole of like, what else is out there? What dimensions are there? What else exists? And so fast forward a couple of years after that, and then I went through a really big transition in life where I left my partner. I was previously engaged to him, moved out of the house, changed my career. Everything just kind of happened all at once. And that was around the time that I had my initial first contact experience through a channeling. And I think it was it was a combination of the trauma, the heartbreak, being open then to saying, I'm ready to serve. What can I do? So there was an openness that came with all of that as well, which led to the experience of me connecting with the Pleiadians and the Arcturians.
Wow. Well, thank you for taking us through that. Now, when you say that you had that first experience with channeling, that first kind of contact experience with channeling, is that you channeling? You were the channel, or somebody was channeling for you, or?
Yeah, I was channeling. Yeah.
Okay.
I think a couple of weeks before that moment, I had heard about the concept of channeling. That's how fresh I was. Like, that is how new I was to the whole thing. I'd heard about it, I'd heard someone else doing it. And then 2 weeks later, I was experiencing it. And
Wow.
so that was a pretty big leap to make. But I think it happened because I was open to it, I was receptive to it. And I think because everything else in my life was so up in the air anyway, it was like, well, you might as well add a spiritual awakening to the mix. So it all happened at once. It was quite challenging as well because I then spent the next year thinking, oh my God, I'm going crazy. Like, I've got these voices in my head. Should I go see a psychiatrist? There was that side of it, that talking as well that was going on in my brain. But I think I'd had enough guidance at that point to realize, and also the experiences that I had in early years as well, to realize that there is more to the physical world, and that yeah, of course, it's possible that I'm making communication and contact with other beings. And so, yeah, I guess I just followed that pathway, and I started listening to that. I had a bit of help along the way as well with the bits of mentoring and tidbits I could find on the internet. But yeah, all in all, it was the openness to that energy, which I only realized years down the track was possible because I'd spent those couple of years doing the Merkaba light body activations. So,
Mm.
like, when you look back on the history of your life and you go, oh, I think everything was just coordinated, like thinking back to when I was 14, 16 years old, seeing 1111 and going on Wikipedia as well and randomly stumbling across articles about like the Bermuda Triangle and like Area 51 and like just I mean this was in my awareness from such a young age. So I think part of it was orchestrated that way. I think on some level I agreed for that, and I put certain experiences into my own life to have that awakening. And then when it happened, it was just like, okay, here I am. What do I do with that? So
Yeah.
that was almost 10 years ago now.
Well, it's amazing because you talk about the spiritual awakening, you've talked about the Merkaba. You said it was probably my higher self who was saying, you're in the 13th dimension. I know that you're a galactic ambassador, as I mentioned. So I feel like there are more and more people lately who, because we've just started having all these drone experiences. Actually, I don't know if is this a thing in Australia? Like, is it on? I'm sure it's on your radar with.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we hear about it. Yeah, a lot of people have been asking me about it, and I'm happy to give my little spiel if you want it around that.
I do want to
Uh,
get to that, but I feel like more people are noticing or questioning
yeah.
the disclosure movement or whatever. So there may be people who are stumbling upon this who are like, wait a minute, is it a spiritual thing? Is it an ET thing? Is it like, how do those things go together? And it may seem very obvious for people who have been in the awakening world for a while, but if there are, well, I guess we can start with when you were doing that channeling, did you automatically know that it was an ET, or did you feel that it was an ET, or how was that for you?
Yeah, I had no idea really. No, actually, that's not true. I had some idea. The very first channeling wasn't even galactic. It was actually a group that called themselves like Mayan Elders that came through.
Oh,
That
okay.
was the very first time. They just said we're this group of beings from the universe. I'm like, okay, all right, cool. And that was the only really contact I ever had with them. But then after that, it was they called themselves a Council of Light, and I just I perceive them as a collective group. Um, but they shared with me specific geometries, and it wasn't until about a year down the track, maybe even longer. It's kind of like, you get these pieces of the puzzle and it makes sense once you get more of the pieces. So all I had back then was, hey, we're a council of light and we're going to share this information with you. Now looking back on it, it was clearly Arcturian because of the codes and the geometries and the frequencies. I just didn't have the knowledge to be able to identify that or to pick up what that frequency was. I mean, it was that blue energy, very like classic Arcturian.
Mm.
Now I look back on it and I go, of course it was Arcturian, but I never would have known that back then.
Okay. It's so fascinating. And are you still channeling that group?
Oh yeah, I mean now I connect with so many different races. Arcturians are still very much to the forefront. A lot of my work happens with Arcturians, but also I connect a lot with the Galactic Federation. I connect with the Lyran beings, Pleiadians. There's a few non-humanoid aspects in there as well. Most of the time, I'm really just connecting to my soul aspects. So really, the journey has been awakening to more of who I am and going through the higher self and then extending into these other experiences that my soul is having. So the reason why I'm so connected to the Arcturians is because I have an Arcturian soul aspect that I've connected with, and so I'm able to directly get that information, that wisdom through that Arcturian self, which is really just it's me, it's my soul energy.
Mm, I love it. So when you connect, I guess most of the time it's telepathic. But you've had some really, really fascinating experiences in terms of what you've seen in the physical and some, I mean, beyond synchronicities. Can you share a little bit about how these worlds have converged where it's like it's telepathy, but then you're experiencing things in the physical?
Yeah, I've got two really great experiences I can share with you on that. The first one happened last year in Sedona. That was during a group contact experience with about 60 people. We all went out to this private property after a 3-day retreat. And yeah, I mean, it was amazing. We had some really incredible facilitators there as well. So I think that helped really raise the energy of the group. But yeah, I mean, there was about half an hour towards the end of that experience where the starship that I'm connected with, it's called the Aru Terra, it's a ninth dimensional starship. It was just sitting there in this localized position for about 30 minutes, flashing every 20 to 30 seconds, like regular intervals, like
Wow.
just flashing and flashing. And the best part for me in all of that was I was the only person there that had the telepathic contact because I knew exactly what the ship is, who's on board. My soul aspect is on there again. So I was getting a lot more information than what everyone else was getting. Most people were just seeing it. So it was witnessed by about 60 people, but I think I was the one that was having the actual telepathic side of it. And my God, the energy was just so, so high. And the reason why it was able to stay there for such a long time and have that level of consistent convergence was because the whole group was focusing in with that intention, that loving vibration. And yeah, they towards the end of it, I had the telepathic download. They said we're gonna do a little streak, like a flyby before we leave. And just as everybody was packing up towards the end and people are getting ready to go home, I look up and right there you see this red and gold streak that goes by. And
It gives me
I just had to
chills.
remember. I was like, I told you so, so I've had those sorts of experiences where the telepathy and the physical have completely merged together almost instantaneously. And that to me is like it's that next level of experience because I've had telepathic contact since 2015 with the channeling, but to have the telepathic at the same time as the physical, that's a whole new level. So I had that happen again recently, just a few weeks ago in Uluru. I was there for the solstice, and I was speaking at the Cosmic Consciousness event that happens there every year. And so on the night of the solstice, a bunch of us went out and we did a contact experience. They played us a meditation. And so everyone's getting into this energy. And my partner and I were laying there on the ground and just looking up at the night sky. And I had this moment where I was extending my light body up. So I was breathing in, expanding this up. And then as I exhale, I hear this message, we're sending down a beam of light, and boom, there it is. And this happened multiple times. I breathe up, I exhale down, beam of light. I breathe up, exhale down, beam of light. Like instant. And
Wow.
when it happened that many times and around, I've got this all on video too. You can hear me in the background talking to a partner saying, oh, look, there it is. Or saying like they're about to do it and then they do it and actually
Oh my
having
gosh.
that level of convergence. That's been a really neat experience for me in the last year.
Wow. That it's just so fascinating. Oh my goodness. Now, we did touch on the drone the drone things that are happening. And again, not sure if this is happening in Australia too. I think it's happening all over the world, but I would love to hear your take on and the intel that you have on what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have heard about it here in Australia, and some people have reported it as well. So this is just my personal thing. What I do is anytime I hear something like this, first thing I want to check in is I want to check in the frequency. Is this something that I want to engage in? Is this a high vibrational energy? Is it off world? Is it military? So I'm just trying to get a gauge of what it is. And what was really interesting about the drone experience was the guidance that I personally received was don't put your energy into that. Like they literally said, stop reading it, stop going into it, don't extend your energy. So that to me is already a sign that the vibration of what's happening there is not something that I personally want to engage with. So I mean, there's a lot that can be deduced from that. One is that it most likely doesn't have a lot of high vibrational extraterrestrial beings. And even if part of it is ET, which I believe it's a combination, which is interesting in and of itself, I believe there's a combination of things going on. The question is around is it benevolent? And I think that's really important to ask ourselves because anything and everything does exist in the universe. And sometimes when when you talk about disclosure and contact, there's an aspect of first of all, does it exist? Which to me is an obvious yes. But then the other aspect of that is it benevolent? And I think when you're applying that additional lens to it, you get a little bit more discerning in which energies, which craft, which beings you connect with, which is aside from the fact that they exist at all. So I think the disclosure movement, in some regards, is really paving the way in helping people to see that yes, actually this is real. Whereas I feel like where I'm kind of sitting now is like I already know they're real. Let's get to that next level of being very particular in our own sovereignty, our own energy field, and recognizing that yes, anything and everything can exist. Is this something I personally want to engage with? And so when it came to the drone situation, for me it was a very clear no. That was my inner guidance. Also, Star Family was screaming it at me, just don't go there. So beyond that initial sort of tapping in to see what it was about, I've really kept away from a lot of that. But I can appreciate how, for people who are at the very early stages or know nothing about this, it's definitely creating that momentum of asking more questions and making people think about whether or not this is really a true phenomenon.
Mm, I love that. Last night, the last 2 nights, I have seen drones, something, because it's winter for us. I know it's summer for you, obviously. But it's very dark, for most of the day. It gets dark early, let's say, this time of year for us. And it's very, very cold outside right now. And yesterday and the day before, when I was out in the evening, I did see something in the sky, and they looked like drones. I mean, they just looked like terrestrial drones but it's weird circumstances because it
Yeah.
was like Monday night and it's freezing outside. So it's like, well, it's probably not recreational because it's not like a summertime, like, let's just have a laugh. It's a Saturday night. Like, let's get the drone out. It's like, what can you actually even see? It's dark
Mm.
outside. And it didn't feel like, to me, I didn't get like the chills or, any of the kind of things that for me would be like, ooh, there's a connection here or anything like that. But it was just
Mm.
peculiar. And it's happened 3 times in the last 2 nights where I'm just like, what is going on? Because I've been hearing about it and then to see it for myself, but again, it didn't even look like, it just looked weird because it obviously wasn't a plane, it wasn't a helicopter, and it was so low, and it was just like, what? So anyway, it's bizarre. It's just a weird thing. But speaking of disclosure and this kind of how it can kind of pave the way for people who haven't really thought about this before, I believe for you, 2027 is a year that you feel that there is going to be more contact. Is that correct? 2027?
Yeah, well, when I say 2027, what I'm referring to is the vision that we're holding with Star Family. And it's really important to recognize that we play a very active role in that process. So, like 2027 isn't a prediction. If anything, it's more like probably closer to say a goalpost. Like it's a vision that we're working towards
Hmm.
because this is something that we have conscious influence over. And by that, what I mean is it's every person deciding upon themselves to initiate that contact, to have that exploration for themselves. I mean, I host my podcast called First Contact, and our entire philosophy in that is that first contact is when you make contact. So I had my first contact a long time ago. So I'm not talking about like a governmental level disclosure, which may or may not happen, but also I feel like is not necessary because if they're awakening, like when the awakening starts to rapidly accelerate in the way that it is now, there's a possibility that the human population can get there without the government saying anything. So, I mean, they can just be doing whatever they're doing, whether they say it or don't say it, whether the media reports it or doesn't report it. There's already a lot happening behind the scenes, and to back that actually with some of my recent experiences doing my PhD. I mean, I've only just started. I'm fresh in this, but already what I'm starting to see is there's more research behind this than we think there is. I mean, people have been researching consciousness for years. If you look at some of the modern theories of consciousness, it actually makes total sense that all of this is real. And of course, we can experience it. And so it's just now like waiting for sort of the mainstream to catch up in that. And whether the government has a role in that or not, to me, is not that relevant, really. I mean, I'm certainly not putting all my eggs in that basket. What I know that I can do is I can go out into the night sky, I can activate my own light body, and I can have my contact just like we did in Sedona, Uluru, many other instances as well.
I love that. And it comes in with the sovereignty piece too, where it's
Yeah.
that maturity of starting to understand that we take responsibility for ourselves and we don't need permission from the government, but it does feel that that's more of like the bleeding edge. That's like a smaller percentage of the population would be more sovereign to say, well, it doesn't matter if the government is gonna disclose this or not. And hopefully, like you say, we are on, that there is this mass awakening happening, and that will just mean that more and more people will become more sovereign. But I understand that sovereignty is a big part of your work too, and your messaging with technology, with big government. That does feel like there are some oversteps in citizens' privacy, which can feel invasive. What types of guidance do you give people to help them to be in their sovereignty?
So for me, what I teach all of my students when we do this work is first and foremost, always check in with the frequency. Always check in. Like, what information are you allowing in? What ideas are you allowing in? What energies are you allowing into your field? We have this spaciousness within us, this vast, expansive inner starlight. There's lots of ways you can describe that. But it's really, in the simplest way, it's that deep internal peace that we have in our heart. And from that space, you actually already are sovereign. And that's my biggest reminder to people is if you tap into that space and you recognize the sovereignty that you already have, then you're not anchoring your sovereignty or your freedom or anything else into something outside of you. One of the big rhetorics around the disclosure space that I deeply disagree with is that, oh, the government is taking away our freedom, or the government is taking away. Well, actually, no, they're not, because there is something that you always have access to, and that's that connection within. And that connection within also has the power to create outcomes and the power to influence our reality through the quantum field. And so, just, the one thing I would say around sovereignty is stop believing that it was out there, because the second you recognize that you already have it, then all you do is you just maintain that on a day-to-day basis. So when something comes into your field, you check in and you go, well, this is what my inner peace feels like. This is where I sit with this. Maybe I'm not going to take on that idea. Maybe I'm not going to take on that belief or that rhetoric around what other people are saying. And the same applies to any galactic being, any contact experience. I'm very mindful in which energies I connect with. Of course, it's all, when you're coming from a place of love, you do attract a lot of very high vibrational, loving beings as well. But it's always good to just have that little bit of a self check and go, am I sitting in that true love frequency? Is that really what I'm connecting to right now? And so that becomes that daily practice of refining and polishing that internal state within, so that we are collectively then lifting that vibration for a more positive, peaceful experience of contact.
Mm. I love that. And it's so powerful, as so many things that you say, I'm like ping ping ping, because talking about like the quantum and consciousness and the research that has been already been done, that does tell us how important our thoughts are, how important the words we say are, how important our beliefs are. And if we believe that we are powerless, that's the reality that we see, that's the reality that we reinforce, that we create. So the more that we can understand how powerful we are, and be intentional, and be directive in terms of the thoughts that we're thinking, what we're calling in. And um, it's I get excited for that quantum perspective to take more root in the everyday living, so that it's not. Um, I feel like sometimes if people hear the word quantum, not necessarily in the work of people who are working through their ascension and so forth, and they're actively seeking information on consciousness, but quantum can sound like a very heavy word, the quantum field, or wait, I'm not a physicist. I don't know those words, or I don't need to know this information. But, this fabric of reality of all that is, and the infinite possibilities, and the way that we can direct our attention and intention to pull forward that higher reality, that higher good, is so powerful and empowering. So I love that. Um, One of the groups that you have contact with is Ashtar, correct?
Yeah.
And that's something that, because when I have come across your work, the first time I came across your work with Ruben Langdon, that was something that we were talking about in that conversation. So tell us a little bit about Ashtar and your connection there.
So I first developed a very personal connection with him probably around about 2015 or 16, I think 16. So my connection, my level of connection comes through my soul aspect. So just a little bit of framing around that is like if we imagine that I am like the finger of this hand, right? Like that's me. And the higher self is the entire palm. Well, there's four other fingers here, right? So what are they? So we would call them soul aspects. So this is Eesha, this little finger here having an experience. This one here is actually a soul aspect called Lily, and she is on board. She's actually commander of the Arcturian, the Starship. Now, there's many other soul aspects I have as well, but that specific aspect, she is the commander of a starship that is part of the Ashtar command fleet, the fleet that is in that specific blue vibration. And so the Arcturian is one of the ships that are part of, and there's thousands, there must be thousands of ships craft as part of that, but the Arcturian is one of the ships that's part of that fleet. So my connection through Ashtar comes through that, and also because Lily's last name is Shayran and Ashtar's last name is Shayran. So how that connects through is Ashtar has two brothers, for lack of a better word. It's quite different in those realms, but two soul rays that are very closely connected with him, Ashura and Ashira. And Ashura has a very specific ray that is connected through that line, and his name is Ashali, and Ashali is Lily's twin flame. So through that connection, because I'm connected with Lily and Lily's last name is Shayran, Ashali and Lily Shayran, for lack of a better framing in earthly terms, you would say I'm somewhat of a relative to Ashtar.
That's fascinating. And so with Ashtar, is this part of the Galactic Federation or it's different? I don't know enough of
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah, of
it's
course.
the
Yeah.
same or it's different.
Yeah, so Ashtar, plays quite a significant role with the Galactic Federation. The Federation is a combination of different beings, but Ashtar is one of the beings that is part of that, and he very specifically plays a quite a direct role in assisting humanity with the ascension in those galactic realms. He does other stuff too, but he's doing all sorts of things. But yeah, one of his things is supporting, and so there are moments when like if things are happening at a collective level here on Earth, Ashtar and the fleet or whichever crafts are required will come and assist. I can give you a very tangible example of that. So back in, oh gosh, what year was it? 2017, 18, I don't know. I have to go back through my notes. But there was a specific year where I went and did a Trinity activation event in Melbourne. And I was very specifically guided to go there. We were doing quite a number of grid work and supporting the energetic grids in Melbourne at the time, which were very dense. There was a huge fourth dimensional vortex running through there. And we did quite a bit of clearing. I'd done a couple of other events there at that point as well with the 1111 gateways too. So after doing those 1111 gateway events, I came back around in, I think it would have been the 3rd of March, yeah, because it was the 3-3 gateway. And we were doing a very specific Trinity activation. And I mean, a whole bunch of things happened around that event. Like my venue got changed at the last minute, and there was just this stuff, this movement, and I had to tune in and go like, what's really happening? So I ended up getting an Airbnb. We only had about 6 people join this event, which is unusual because I would sell out like a room of 40 normally when I go to Melbourne. And for some reason, the energy was just very different. We ended up having exactly 6 people attending, so that's a Trinity number. And so with these 6 people in this Airbnb, there was so many little synchronicities leading up to that point, even down to the fact that on the way there, I was drawing on my iPad the picture of the threefold flame with a lilac crescent moon under it. And that's just the vision I was getting. Like, we need to have this energy, and this is the energy that we're anchoring in. And when I walk into this Airbnb, which remember was a last minute change, there's a giant painting on the wall which has that exact crescent lilac moon. Like it was this abstract picture. Like you cannot make this stuff up, you know?
Wow.
And just yeah, the colors of everything. It was in this beautiful aqua, like so many synchronicities, you know? So yeah, I had that experience. And then the night before the event, we yeah, I mean I was asleep actually. I was just kind of half asleep, probably half meditating, you know. And then I got woken up at like 2:30 in the morning, and Ashtar just came in. Like I felt his energy. I didn't physically see him, but like his energy was so strong. And it was like in the etheric, he landed the entire starship almost like on the same level as me. Like he walked out into my bedroom, and I like nearly had a heart attack because it was so full on. But I was like, oh my God, like what are you guys doing? And you know, that's when he explained to me, he said, you know, that specific planetary mission that we were doing, there were a lot of energies trying to attack and like get in the way of that. And so there's a lot of distortion, a lot of interference. That's why the venue moved at the last minute. We had to just shift everything around. And then he said, yeah, we had to come in and just get rid of that energy. So in that specific instance, they came in to support me directly, like my energy field and protect me, but also to assist with the planetary mission at that level as well. So that's one example of the kind of work that Ashtar and his team might be doing to support. And that's just one of the very tangible experiences that I personally have related to.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I'm curious in that vein about your direct experiences like that. So you were mentioning that you were kind of maybe in that hypnagogic state and then but then you were really feeling that presence. And I relate to that so much because I haven't had like the experiences where I can say like I was taken aboard a ship or something like that. But I have had those times where I'm in that in between state and I'm not asleep. I know I'm not asleep because sometimes I will have even my eyes open, but I'll start feeling vibrations like so palpably that I'll be like, is my bed shaking? Because and it's concentrated in one area of the body. There have been times where I'm like, should I open my eyes? Because I'm really sure that there is something here with me, like working on my energy. And it always feels benevolent. Um, and there are times where I'm like, okay, I'll open my eyes, but am I ready for what I might see? And then I'll open my eyes and I can't see anything. So, but have you had like do you feel like you've been taken aboard a ship in your physical body? Is it a lot of that kind of telepathic, hypnagogic kind of thing? Do you relate to what I'm talking about with some of my
Yeah,
experiences?
yeah, absolutely. So I haven't physically, like this body has not gone on board any ships. I think that would be a very challenging feat. And I think that would be quite intense for the physical body to have that cross-dimensional experience. The way that I typically experience it is through consciousness, and also because I do have the soul aspect I'm in contact with. It's almost like, so for example, if I'm connecting with the Terra, it's almost like I as Eesha, I'm now tapping into the consciousness of Lily, and through Lily's eyes and through Lily's body, I'm able to experience the starship. So in that regard, my consciousness has been on that starship, but through this other soul aspect, while Eesha is laying on a bed or sitting down meditating.
Mhm.
So I know I've heard of people having experiences where they physically left and they've physically gone off world. I personally haven't experienced that, but I think there's lots of different ways that we can engage with these kinds of experiences. Although relating back to the Ashtar story, I mean, that moment I actually felt like I was on the starship because the starship was around me. So it's like I was still in the bed, but like it was there and I was like, oh my God. And you know, I was by the time all of that happened, I was actually very awake because it scared the crap out of me. So I was like very awake having this like very lucid kind of experience, you know. So sometimes that can happen as well. But they have said to me, you know, there's a time and place and some of those kinds of experiences happen on an as needs basis. You know, there are reasons why in specific instances where that would be relevant, and other times the preference is actually if we can just meet them in their consciousness, I think that's actually better for the physical body as well. So
Mhm.
there's that element of like what's the most efficient and effective, and if you can just connect in other ways, I think sometimes they would prefer that.
Right. Yeah. Have you ever had the reverse where you feel like Lily is looking through your eyes and she's
Oh
kind and
yeah. Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. One of my favorites. So Lily loves to dance. And one of the strongest experiences I had of embodying Lily through me was when I was at a dance workshop many, many years ago. I signed up to do a 1 day open floor movement workshop. And it was beautiful. I think it was in the five rhythms kind of style. So it was just guided so beautifully. And I was having a ball. I was dancing around, and it was like, there she is, like just so embodied, so present. Like almost felt myself get taller, like really feeling that energy. So yeah, I've had those instances as well. But again, it's that idea of talking about channeling. When you allow an energy to come into your being, the only beings that I actually would allow that are with, for example, my soul aspect Lily or another very direct soul aspect. So I'm very mindful of when and how and which beings are allowed to enter this, because again, coming back to that idea of sovereignty, they have actually said to me, this body, this field, it's sacred. It's really sacred. So be very mindful about what you're actually allowing to come in. If it's your own soul aspect, your own higher self, great. Anything else, I'm generally not a fan.
Mm, I love that. I mean, I just love so much how perceptive you've been able, how much you've been able to dial in what you're able to perceive, because I have, and it's fun as it like unfolds as well, I think, but I still have so many questions in my own experiences where I don't have the names. I don't have the names of the ships. I don't know where they're from. But I did share with you when we were together last time of my own experience with Ashtar, which
Mm,
just happened one time, and it was either 2020 or 2021. And I was in Florida by the water, meditating by the ocean, which I don't have the opportunity to do very often. And I felt that there were three or four beings there that had just kind of shown up in my meditation. And I just heard the word, in my imagination or whatever it was, I thought Ashtar. And I
yeah.
was like, Ashtar, that's a cool word. And I was like, okay, remember that, Ashtar, Ashtar. And and then when the meditation was over and I got a moment, I was like, I'm gonna look up and see if that's a thing. And then I look it up, and sure enough, it is a thing. But then I was like, well, maybe I've heard of it. Like maybe I've come across it and I forgot, and then I'm like bringing it in, like some part of my memory is bringing it in, and I forget that already knew this. So I kind of explained it away. um, but the other piece of that was like as I started to look it up, then there was just some like kind of funky information out there about it where I was like, well, I don't even know if this is like good or bad, or if you want to label things. But it was like, I don't even know if this is helpful for me, or if this is like something that I shouldn't get drawn into. um, what are your thoughts about some of the things that might be out there where there might be questionable information with Ashtar?
I don't trust 90% of what's out there in relation to Ashtar on the internet, because there is so much distortion. There is so much like just lower vibrational, yeah, in connection to that. It's a shame really, because um like when I connect with Ashtar myself, of course it's a very beautiful, very loving energy. The issue isn't with Ashtar. The issue is that when people have distorted channels and then try and connect with Ashtar and they bring through distorted information, it's when people don't necessarily have the ability to know if they're truly connecting with the frequency of Ashtar. I mean, I have at some point met long time ago, read some of the stuff, and they're like, Ashtar said this. And I'm like, Ashtar would never say that. I don't know where the hell you're getting your information from, but that, like, Ashtar would not say that. So the problem is in distortion in communications and poor ability to channel, which relates to a lot of those distorted messages coming through, which unfortunately, people like, there's this tendency to just like blanket believe anything that gets channeled.
Mhm.
without necessarily discerning what's coming through. And this was something that I was very mindful of when I first started channeling. Luckily, I had a couple of tools up my belt that helped me, and one particular in practice that I used, and I used it on myself. Like it was a constant self-reflective practice for me. I used a method called the Golden Bowl of Discernment, where every time I would do a channeling, and I was running events, I was doing channeling events, I was doing it for my friends on a weekly basis. So I was channeling, trance channeling quite frequently. But as I started doing this discernment practice, what I would imagine is whatever I've just channeled, I'd imagine that I'm writing it on this scroll, wrapping it up, and putting it inside this golden bowl of light. And the golden bowl shows me if there is any distortion in there. And in my earlier channelings, like 9 times out of 10, when I was in trance, even if it's just 1%, there'd be these little threads coming through. And then I'd go back and think about what I just channeled and go, oh, that was the sentence that actually wasn't Ashtar or wasn't the Pleiadians or wasn't, because things are coming in, other information's getting in. So it's like when you get wires crossed, it's like that little piece of static, that little piece of transmission, those distortions. You got to be so vigilant about that. And that was actually one of the reasons why I stopped trance channeling at that time and decided to go with a more sovereign method, which is connecting through the inner heart space, which is more now the experience of relaying a message rather than just opening up my channel and allowing everything to come in. So the way I experience it now is it's like I'm standing here, Ashtar's standing in front of me in my heart space. He says a message to me. I can discern the frequency of that message because I've got that connection with him, and then I can relay the message. And to me, I found that it was a lot more accurate, a lot less distortion. I was able to perceive the energies in a much more stronger way and also not compromise my own energy field in the process. So that's been quite a journey of moving from into trance channeling, out of trance channeling, and going what are the other ways that we can make contact that still respect this physical body and this energy field and keep the integrity of the messages that are actually coming through.
Mm. Wow. That's amazing. Are there when I talk about my experience of that kind of contact, whether it was contact or it was my imagination or memory or I don't know, but the fact that you have such detailed information, such solid information, and I understand it's been verified. So you give these names of these ships, and then you've got verification from other people who are also tapping into this. And those are unusual words, obviously. They're not like typical words, at least in English. Um, how how have you been able to hone your skills in such a way that you perceive this type of information, or has it just been kind of through practice and through trust? And what has that been like for you?
The first thing I just want to say is Ashtar is telling me that yes, it was a direct contact and you can trust that experience. So
Oh,
there's your validation.
okay. Oh, that
With
gives
that.
me chills. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, he is telling me that. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is where the practical element comes in. When you're learning anything, when you're learning to ride a bike, you have your training wheels, you ride your bike, you fall a couple of times, you get back up, you keep going. When you're learning how to go to the gym, you want to deadlift 100 kilos, you go to the gym, you practice every day, you build your muscle. So, for me, it's actually not that magical. There are two processes that I use that I now teach to my students as well. One is how to activate the Merkaba light body, and the second is how to access your inner heart. Those two combined are the reason why I can do what I'm able to do. It's daily practice. Anyone can do it. I've taught this to people. I just don't think anyone's that special in that regard. It's like I'm not that special. I just have practiced something for more than 20,000 hours and have perfected it. I'm not even perfected. I can't even make that claim. I'm just better at it than the majority of the population because of the sheer amount of time, energy, commitment, dedication that I've put into learning the practice. So, what we're really dealing with here is like finding the right tools and methodologies that can be taught and replicated at a mass scale, that people can learn this the same way that you would learn any other skill on the planet, except that instead of being a physical skill or even a mathematical skill or something, what we're really dealing with is how do we bridge the gap between the vast consciousness and make it really tangible. And to me, the inner heart journey, it just bridges that gap. It's a very structured process that you can use that opens up that capacity, and anyone can do it once you know the process.
Mm. I love that. So I don't know if you want to share this story, but there is such a cool story from when you went to, well, now is it the UN that you went to?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, that was a fun one.
And then the
Yeah,
meditation, how you were, because there was the scientist
yeah,
and I don't know if that's something you'd want to talk about, but then there was the whole like Starship part to it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I love this story. If you feel like sharing, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I can just tell you what I experienced. I mean, so I got guided to go to Geneva to the United Nations, which I have to say, just a little bit of backstory here. When I was 14 years old in school, I signed up to do a model UN. I was such a nerdy kid, man. Like, I mean, that hasn't changed. I'm doing a PhD now, so what do you expect, you know? But yeah, like that was me. Like at 14, everyone else is like, can I go out drinking? And I'm like, I'm gonna go to the UN, model UN. So I dragged my best friend and we went off and did this thing. And I always said to myself, one day I want to go to the United Nations and I want to experience that. So it only took me 20 years to get there. And age 34, I finally received an opportunity to be invited to go to the United Nations. There was a very specific event, a conference that was happening there, and Nassim Haramein was one of the speakers. Now he'd been on my radar for like a year. Now he's a hard man to get a hold of, but I kept feeling like I need to talk to him. I need to talk to him. I need to, make this connection with him. And of course, things happen. They unfold in the perfect timing as they always do. Friend on Facebook put up a picture of him, like, next to him. And I said, mate, let's reconnect. So anyway, through this person, I ended up finding out about this next event that was happening and yeah, ended up flying to Geneva. And it was just, yeah, it was such an incredible experience. So the night before the actual conference, I got woken up at 2:30 in the morning. And keep in mind, I was jet lagged. So I had gone from Australia to the US. I just spent about some 27 days traveling all the way across the US. And then I was in Miami. From Miami going to Geneva. I was jet lagged through the roof,
Oh my
trying to get a good
gosh.
night's sleep. And then tapping on me, knock, knock. Hello, Eesha, wake up, go outside. I'm like, you guys are crazy. Like, so anyway, I woke myself up. I said, okay, just let me get a cup of tea and grab my blanket from the hotel, whatever, sit myself out on the balcony. And they said, we're going to come through and we want you just to anchor this. And some of the messages I got around then were around the idea that well, Geneva has a fairly neutral airspace. There's not a lot of military stuff going on there, which makes sense. We already know that it is fairly like that anyway. It's the city of peace. So, and that is why they had the International Day of Peace at the United Nations in Geneva, because, it all makes sense. So, yeah, I sat outside and I was doing my practice. I was initiating contact. It took about maybe hour and a half or so, maybe more for it to come in. But they did say to me, they said very specifically, they said, Eesha, we'll let you go to bed by 5 a.m. I'm like, thanks, guys. So anyway, somewhere around like 4:30 or something, they start. So that was actually 2 hours later. They came in and there was a cloud that was just above the balcony. And I started to see, they said, we're coming in. It's like, we've got clearance. We're coming in closer. Like, wait for us. We're coming in. Like, I just kept getting those messages. And they were very, very good at like the continual communication because it was like 2 hours. Like, I would have just gone to bed. But they kept
Yeah.
saying, coming, this is what's happening. We're just getting the clearance. We're doing this. Like, they went through all the proper channels. And then eventually they went into this cloud. You could see this object just moving, and the cloud was like, it was a little bit fatter to start with, and so they were doing almost like these figure eights, and every once in a while a beam of light was going up from the cloud, not coming down, it was going up. Like, what else could cause that? Like, what
Oh,
else could have
wow.
that? I tried to video it, but I had a really terrible phone at the time. I've since upgraded to a newer iPhone model, and I probably would get it. But anyway, I just didn't have the right technology at the time to be able to get it on camera. It just appeared all black. But yeah, just getting these flashes of light going up, and it lasted for about half an hour. And then part of the transmission that came through around that time as well was they said to me, Eesha, we want you to walk up to Nassim Haramein tomorrow morning. And we want you to say these exact words. We want you to say, hi, my name is Eesha Patel. I'm a galactic ambassador, and I have a message for you from Ashtar. They told me to say that exact phrase. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is crazy. He's a scientist. They're going to think I'm mad. I'm going to get thrown out of the UN. Like all of this stuff is going on in my head. And I was just like, oh my God. And there was this friend actually. That's a whole other synchronicity in and of itself. I met this guy through Spotify. His name is Eric Hausler. He's yeah, he's a musician. I just listened to his tracks online and I resonated with his music so much that I tracked him down. I messaged him, got him on WhatsApp. I was basically just complimenting him on his music. Anyway, he reached out to me a few days before saying, wow, you're having this amazing trip because he was following me on social media. And I said, hey, this is wild, but like come to Geneva. There's this thing happening. You can come. I had no idea that Eric actually knew way more about Nassim Haramein and his team than I did. But he ended up flying all the way to Geneva and we met up in person for the first time. And so when I met him at breakfast that morning, I was telling him the story of how, they've told me to say this message to Nassim Haramein. And, I hold Nassim on this massive pedestal. Like he's this like amazing physicist, he's like the coolest dude ever. And he just really reassured me. He's like, look, Eesha, if you're getting the message, just trust in that. And so I think he held that pillar of groundedness for me. And we went in together. And of course, having him there, he recognized that the people in front of us in the line for the United Nations were actually his team. So when you go into the UN, you have to have your passport, you got to have your permission. They give you like a special ID and everything that you have to set up ahead of time. There's a whole process. You can't just walk into the UN, you got to go through a whole background check, like everything. So we went through all of that. And then you're going through the metal detectors as well. And so when we were standing in line to go through those metal detectors, there was three people standing in front of us. And Eric just whispered to me and said, hey, that's Nassim's team. And I said, oh, well, great. Let's chat with them. And of course, the way this happened as well was because like the timing of it was because our Uber dropped us off at the wrong entrance. And so we had to walk around 10 minutes, but we got there just in time to be right behind these people who I didn't know. I wouldn't have recognized them from, bar of soap here, but he knew them because he'd watched all the videos and he was a lot more in the loop about it than I was. I just knew that I had to go in and give this message. And I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to meet the guy. But because we went in at the same time as the team, Nassim comes in, we walk out onto the lawn. He comes in from the other direction at the exact same moment. So before 10 o'clock in the morning, I've already met him, met the team, delivered my little message to him, and it all just happened like so perfectly in so much synchronicity. And the first thing he said to me, this is the funniest part. I thought he was going to think I'm nuts. He just turned around to me and said, oh, thank you. Oh, and I'm like, wait, Ashtar, like, this is madness. Like, yeah, it was a wild experience to receive that guidance, follow that guidance, the way that everything converged in terms of the timing of everything, having Eric there as well, who'd flown in especially for this. And I'd only met him online through his music on Spotify. Like, who does that, But
Oh my
everything
word.
happened at the same moment of convergence. And then it was perfect. I gave him the message. And yeah, we just from there just built a connection. So I've had a beautiful connection with him and the team since then. His partner and CEO of SpaceFed, Sarah, was on one of our recent events. We are one of their affiliates for their products as well. So we've just had this beautiful relationship that's been built up over time as well. And it was all just because of that transmission and the following of that guidance, and then having that confirmation where he was just like, "Oh yeah, of course I know who this guy is." I mean,
So
yeah,
he
it's just
knew who Ashtar was. You didn't have to
I
explain.
know.
Oh my gosh.
But
It's
I thought
so
I'd have to. I thought I'd have to give the whole spiel, like, yeah, and even just the whole like saying that I'm a galactic ambassador for me. I mean, this is new for me in the last year. They told me this years ago that I'd be saying this and that I'd be having this role, but I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, can I just be Isha? Like, can I just,
yeah.
like it feels like such a really like high status kind of thing that I was like, I don't really want or need or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like I've embraced that in the last year or so to go, okay, cool. Like if you want me to play that role, like and with honor, like really with a lot of sacred honor, I'm happy to now step into that and move in that position. But yeah, when they told me to say that to him, I just was like, oh, who am I to say that? What if he thinks I'm crazy? Just all the human stuff. So I think, yeah, going through all of that and then coming out the other end and having the experience of that confirmation where he knew exactly what I was talking about, was so open and receptive to it, and I had no idea. That was really quite mind-blowing for me.
That is mind blowing. And thank you for sharing that because it's an amazing story. And I love how it just keeps going in terms of like your relationship with him. It's just divine. Um, one thing I do want to go back to is when you said that you were receiving the telepathy from the ship and they were saying, we're getting clearance, we're getting clearance. What do you understand in terms of who's giving them clearance? Are they working with humans? Are they working with the Federation? Like, what do you like? Are they, is this like official airspace type of, FAA kind of thing or?
I have asked that question. I actually asked them at the time that it was happening. And I think sometimes these things are on a need to know basis. Like some
Okay.
things aren't meant to go publicly out. I'm very public facing. So um, basically, if anything is not meant to go out publicly, a lot of the time I just won't get told. Because I'm very transparent. I don't keep secrets. It's hard for me to keep a secret. That's one of my things is I'm probably really bad at it. So they don't put me in that position. So if something is not meant to be publicly disclosed, they'll just say, Eesha, you don't need to know that. I trust in that. One thing they did share with me was that most of it came through actually from the Federation itself. So I feel like there is some level of I want to say hierarchy, for lack of a better word, but I feel like their their guidance trumps what even like the Earth military might have to say about it. So
Okay.
I think there is something around that. I intentionally didn't go too deep into that. I feel like some of the politics behind that will get revealed when the timing is right. But what I do know is that they were communicating with a group of beings, star beings, and most of that permission was actually coming through that.
Okay. Oh, it's so interesting. So
Yeah.
you shared that you work with people to help them hone these skills themselves. Talk about how people can connect with you and learn from you and the amazing work that you have coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have just recently started teaching the inner heart practice as a 12-week journey. It's called the Inner Heart Journey. And we basically go through step by step all the things that you need to develop contact, including how to activate your Merkaba light body, how to, connect with beings in a sovereign way without trans channeling or having to leave the body. We talk about the bridge to consciousness and 5D frequency and the unified field. So all of that is included in a 12-week program. So we have those regularly running now throughout the year. You can just head to our website, eeshapatel.com, www.eeshapatel.com. And we also have, for those who just are a bit curious, maybe they want to first try it out a little bit first, we have just a really entry level 5-day taster event. We call it 5 days to 5D. You can come along, try out a couple of practices. We do a couple of meditations throughout, as well as go through some of the theory. And we'd also talk about like how to connect with your higher self, the language of the higher self. It's a little bit more entry level for those who are just starting out. It's a really great way to dip your toe in. And then from there, if you want to do the bigger 12-week journey, you can do that as well. So the website for that one is journey.eeshapatel.com. But you can also find all of that information on the website. And we do run these events at regular intervals throughout the year. So just head to the website, check when the next one is, and you can get yourself registered for that.
I love that. And do you want to share a little bit as we wrap up here about this PhD program that or the PhD studies that you're doing? That's fascinating too.
Yeah, I think I'm about to be the world's first doctor in intergalactic communications and diplomacy. So that's what
Wow.
I'm working towards. I literally, like I said, have just started. It's so fascinating. I'm 2 weeks into my consciousness studies course, and it's really interesting to see how much is already out there, and also thinking about where I can bring my experience to further the field of research and to bring to really bring that into the mainstream. Like what I want is for people to stop thinking galactic consciousness belongs in this woo-woo spiritual bucket. I mean, yes, there is a spiritual aspect to it, but it's actually a very real phenomenon. I mean, when you can go out into your backyard, extend your light body up and get a physical sighting, we're not just dealing with woo-woo anymore. In some instances, it's actually more real than a lot of other spiritual arguments out there because we're getting a tangible physical experience that is coinciding with the actual consciousness piece of it. So, yeah, I'm really excited to go into that and hopefully add my contribution, my piece into that field down the track when I do my thesis and maybe have some further explorations and contributions into all of that.
That's beautiful. And you're talking to podcast listeners. So Final thing, tell people about your podcast because you interview some amazing guests. So
Yeah, the podcast is called First Contact with Eesha Patel. We're on all major platforms, so if you want to check us out, YouTube, Spotify. Yeah, we have some amazing guests. We've even had people like Avi Loeb on there. You know, he's building that giant telescope to see ET activity. But then we also have more of the metaphysical side of things. We have people like Adam Apollo, Marilyn Gavicki, Alan Steinfeld, big names in the space. A lot of these people speak at all the major events. So if you want to check out some deeper conversations with them, definitely go have a listen to the First Contact podcast.
beautiful. Well, thank you so much. It's really been a joy and an honor to be with you, Eesha. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a wonderful chat, Kara.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Soul Elevation. Please take a moment to think about someone in your life who might be uplifted or have their curiosity sparked by this content, and please send it to them. Let's keep sharing high frequency, empowering content to reinforce the highest potential for humanity. I also invite you to subscribe to this content. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you for the next episode of Soul Elevation.